blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've known less days than to sing our God's praise than when we first begun.
In today's lecture, I get to introduce myself. As I said, Dr. Thomas has had an event in his life where his sister passed. He'll be lecturing next, not this Sunday, but next Sunday. I'd like to talk a little bit about the new year today. I'm going to read a passage out of my little black book here to start with. In the new year, I will live one day at a time. I will make each day one of preparation for better things ahead. I will not dwell on the past or the future, only on the present. I will bury every fear of the future, all thoughts of unkindness and bitterness, all my dislikes, my resentments, my sense of failure, my disappointments in others and myself, my gloom and despondency. I will leave all these things buried and go forward in this new year into a new life, embracing the love of God. As I enter into this new year, I made 3 resolutions. I've already broken 2 of them. So, you don't have to. The new year is kind of nice because it gives us an opportunity, a social opportunity to make resolutions, but you don't have to have that to make resolutions through the year. But it is nice that once a year we feel obligated to look at ourselves and try to make something better of it. But again, just because it doesn't stick then doesn't mean you can't try the rest of the year. I guess one of my biggest problems is the irritation that I hear when I hear things from people that just aren't true. I get a real attitude about it. I heard on the news this morning that since the politicians passed their tax package, we no longer have to worry about our taxes going up. Well, last Thursday I had $27 more a week taken out of my check, so that's not exactly true, But to them it's true. Our taxes didn't go up. Our Social Security went up, but our taxes didn't go up. So, you hear these word games, and this is just indicative of a lot of the things that you run into when you deal with people, not just politicians, but people. And I always remember this famous line from Max Headroom when they first started HBO back eons ago. He was this talking cartoon head that always had these one-liners at the beginning of every show. And his question was, how can you tell when a politician's lying? And then he pauses, and it's because his lips are moving. And that's where that famous line came from that you hear. And, it's just the society that they live in, much like the society that we choose to live in oursells. I was asked yesterday, I'm training a new co-worker to take over my position when I retire in about 4 or 5 years. It's a pretty complicated position, and of course the subject comes up about religion, and he asked me what religion I was, and I told him I was a spiritualist, and he asked a little bit about that, so I explained that to him. While I am a spiritualist, this is an open spiritual church, so don't mistake that you have to be a spiritualist to come here. That's just my religious background to this point. And he asked me, he said, what do you say when people say to you that mediumship is a fraud, that mediumship just isn't true when they see you do mediumship, or you tell them about mediumship? And I began to tell him that, in my earlier days I was a little offended by it, and I used to argue with people. I've had discussions with everything from Jehovah's Witnesses to Orthodox Baptists, Church of Christ people, everything at work and in my home about my religious beliefs. And I've come to find out that the best thing for this is just let them make what they will of it, because whatever they make of it will change their lives. Whether they feel that it is a fraud, it further ingrains them in their religious belief, which is a good thing. It makes them more true to their own religious beliefs. If they believe in what I'm doing, then it opens their mind to another spiritual reality than what they're in now. So it really doesn't matter what they make of it. I don't really care. It is what it is. They make of it what they will make of it. And it's not my responsibility to change their perception, which is what I basically told him. And that was an interesting comment that I made to him, because he really didn't expect that. And this is how things happen pretty much through a lot of our lives. And I'll show this by an example. I've done quite a number of, I'm what they call a physical healer. I have a pretty consistent effect on physical maladies, cancers, blood-borne diseases, things like that when I work with people. I don't do so well with addictions, compulsions, or mental things, but I do reasonably well with physical maladies. And some of the healing stories that I'll share with you, this is how, when we make an effort, it rarely turns out the way we thought it would, but there's always a benefit to us when we make the step of faith. There was a guy that I knew that lived near me, and this is a recent occurrence. He had been put on insulin, then he'd been put on heart medication, and his health kept deteriorating more and more and more the more of these medications he was put on. And I've known him for a while, and he came up and lived across the street from my son. And he came over and he said, "I'm going up to Minnesota to die, Steve." He says, "You got any words for me?" I said, "Never stop following your own guidance. Always go where you're inspired to go, and live each day as if it was your last anyway." And he goes up there, and he goes back to the doctor that had delivered him. And this guy's older than I am. Wow. I'm in my 60s. So he goes back to the doctor that delivered him in this country town. And the doctor, he went to him so he could get a wheelchair, because his muscles were stopping to the point to where he couldn't even walk anymore. So the doctor comes in and says, "Well, let's run some tests and see what's going on with you." So he runs some tests, and about a week later he comes back and he puts a cardboard box on the table. And he says, "That's the solution to your problems." And my friend Bobby says, "What do you mean that's the solution to my problems? What am I supposed to do with that?" He says, "You take every medication you're taking and put it in that box, because you don't have diabetes and you don't have heart problems, and the medications are your problems."
Yep.
So he put all the medications, and I'm not encouraging people that are all on maintenance medications to do this, but this was a doctor-prescribed act. He put them all in there, and the story, and about 6 months later, now this is after he went up there, 6 months later, this is how spirit works. He moves across, I live out in the country a little bit, he moves back to this house that's back behind me, about 5 acres back. And I thought I saw him riding in front of my house to go to his the access drive back there. I said, "My God, that looks like Bob. He's supposed to be dead by now." In another state. I see the spirit manifestation. So I go back there, I ride my tractor back there, and I talk to him, so I get a lot of peace riding down these dirt roads on my tractor. And I said, "By God, that is you, isn't it, Bob?" He says, "Yeah," and he told me his story. And he said, "I'm back to work, I'm back on my feet, and I'm feeling great." So there's an example of somebody who went to a doctor thinking he was dying, and this doctor, and that was his effort, was to go get help to finish his life with, and he got his life back. Another healing story that shows my effort with healing, and why you should never put your intentions into a healing act for a desired result you want from it. A man came to me, his wife brought it to me for healing. He had gotten some kind of atrophying of his brain on the front side, wasn't it? He didn't have dementia or anything, but he had had some failing of blood circulation in the front of his head. He started losing his short-term memory, similar to dementia. And he had started this huge pharmaceutical company, and all of his family worked at it. and he was not letting go of the reins of power because he did not want to lose control. He knew he was losing his short-term memory, but he refused to step down from the company. He was misplacing critical records. He was not making deadlines of filings that was needed to be made, and he wasn't allowing anybody else to help him. And so they brought him to me for healing. And I started working with him, and my inspiration told me that the wife needed as much healing as he did. So I started working healing on both of them. And what happened was after about 2 or 3 months, they stopped coming. And I asked her, I said, did everything work out for you? Well, he never got his short-term memory back. I said, well, what happened? She said, well, we kind of fell back in love again, and he felt safe letting go of the business because he felt wanted, he felt needed in another aspect of his life. So while the healing didn't restore his memory, it did heal his life. So there's another example there. The other example is that I just got contacted by, in the past year I've had about 4 close friends pass away, and every one of them knew they were dying before they died. And they called me up, knowing that I'm a spiritualist minister. Some of them were spiritualists, some of them weren't, but every one of them wanted end-of-life counseling. And wanted me to talk to them about them making their transition. And I got questions on everything from, is this karmic? Am I a bad person? Why is God doing this to me? All the usual litany of questions. And every one of them had the same question regardless of their religious belief or lack of it. Spiritualist, Baptist, Christian, all of them had the same questions when I spoke to them. And I recently had a call from one person who I hadn't seen in quite a while or heard from in quite a while. And he sent me this big email. I've had the same email address for 30 years. I've never changed it. The company's been bought up and re-bought up, so I've got the same email address I've had since I was in my 30s. And he says, is this email address still good? I hope so. So I sent him an email back saying yes it was, and I gave him my phone number. And we talked the other day, and this guy is dying. He's got an immune deficiency diseases. He's been diagnosed with lupus. He's about in his early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. He's been to every allopathic hospital. He was fairly wealthy at one time. He went to every hospital in America. He went to John of God several times. This has all been over since 2009. He's been trying to get this resolved. He went to down to experimental clinics in Mexico as his last hope, and they told him finally to go home and put his affairs in order. So he finally contacted me through email. This is usually what happens. People usually resort to spiritual healing and spiritual counseling as a last resort, unfortunately. But that's usually the people that we get. And he asked me for end-of-life counseling, and I started speaking to him again. And we had quite a nice conversation, and, I'm intuitive when I speak to people about this. It's not a type of thing where I've got this canned speech and these canned sayings that I say to people. It's all intuitive and in the moment. So it is a form of mediumship, this counseling, a form of intuitive discernment. And healing does come from this type of speaking over the phone, in person to people. I spoke to a lot of people, and they say, I felt so good after we spoke. And not just because of what I said to them, because it put their minds in order for whatever was going on. So after all of this has been going on with me for a number of years. The first healing that I ever did, Manny and I got called to it. This guy called me up, and he said, you're a healer. And I said, well, I tend to generate healing energies. I am not a healer by the definition of it. He says, how much do you expect to get paid? This is I said, well, I don't expect to get paid anything. How much do you expect me to donate? I said, I don't expect you to donate anything. Okay, well, come on up here to Ocala. I need some help. So it took me a few days to get time off of work, and Manny and I went up there, and this guy lapsed into a coma, and he was dying of pancreatic cancer, advanced stages. And he, like this friend of mine, had been through every healing modality possible. And he also was a founder of a very large national healing movement of spiritual and energetic healers. So I didn't know why he called me. I'm just a little nobody from Casadega, at the time. Still am, but I'm from Daytona now. And he had lapsed into a coma, and his family wouldn't let us in to see him to begin with. And these are spiritual people. They aren't Orthodox Christians, and they didn't want us to come in to see him. But finally, the son-in-law, said, well, he called you up here to see him, so come in and see him, even though he's in a coma state. So we go in the house, and there's all these clocks. There must have been 1,000 clocks on the wall, and they're these wind-up clocks. They're not the electric clocks. So there's this constant background of ticking, and there's nice music on. And Manny and I go up and start working with him. And this guy opened his eyes while we were working with him. And he looked up at Manny and he said, I love you. And Manny was pretty well overwhelmed. So was I, because this guy had been in a coma for days. And he came out of that coma, and for about a week, and he made right with his family. And I came back for another healing by myself, and did a healing with him, and it was really strange because, again, there were all these clocks in the room, the music was playing in the background, there were 3 or 4 family members sitting on the couch. I don't think Manny was with me that time. And as I was working with him, I entered into the zone of silence. I mean, I couldn't hear the clocks, I couldn't hear the music, and the people on the couch were looking at each other like, what the heck is going on? So I know that they felt that silence too. And I just kept feeling this drawing, and I kept hearing somebody say in the background, we want to use your energy to make him pass. And I'm going, oh my gosh. So I'm sitting there, I said, okay, if that's the purpose of the moment, then I give permission for my energy to be used like this. So he's sitting there and he draws out this huge breath and breathes out this huge breath. And I went, oh my gosh, he passed. And then he drew in another breath and started breathing again. But he was in a coma again. He went back into a coma and passed 24 hours to the minute from the moment that breath had occurred. So I've had some interesting things occur with healing that were well beyond what my hopes and intentions were with this. And this is just an example again of what happens when we involve ourselves in something. It rarely, when we finally get what we want, it rarely feels like we thought it was going to. This was a saying that I heard on TV or on the radio, on talk radio, and it's very true. So whenever we step forward and take that step of faith to become involved with someone, to become involved in an event in our lives, we are responsible for the effort. Many times the result is left up to God. And one of the questions that was asked of me, and is usually asked of me, about these illnesses that people are going through, and it's a pretty interesting question because almost every one of them asked it. They say, is this something that is karmic or that God is doing to me? And my answer is that, while I believe in reincarnation and karma, to say that it is karmic is removing your personal responsibility from being involved in it, because you write it off as unchangeable, as bigger than me, and I can't control it. Karma is an action, not a reason in your life. So again, I do believe in karma. And the answer to, is God doing this to me? God doesn't necessarily do things to you. Sometimes there are things that are put in your life. Am I doing this to myself, or is God doing this to me, is the actual question. A lot of things that occur in your life are by your own making, by your spiritual contract that you have when you come here. Many of them are a result of your interaction with things, i.e. instant karma. But some things are put there as an indispensable part of your spiritual progression. cannot avoid them. You cannot step around them. And they are there to be dealt with. The way that you deal with these things from a human perspective and answer the question, is God doing this to me? Am I a bad person? Why are these things happening to me? Is you begin to realize that everything that happens to you in this life happens from an eternal perspective of God. It does not happen within the immediacy of your life from day to day. What happens to you is for the intention of your eternal evolution. That's why sometimes we can't see the reason for things now. That's why sometimes it doesn't make any sense. Just like this car. Just to lighten things up a little bit. But on a deeper note, when you're in terminal illness, when you have these things occurring to you, the same type of frustration happens to people. To a greater or lesser degree, this is what stymies us from getting by lessons in our life all of the time. And this is the perspective that I would suggest, that one perspective you can look at it from, is this is our eternal development, our eternal self that lives on long beyond this incarnation, this physical life. So we cannot perceive many times what the totality of the lesson is, what the totality of the reason is for this. We just have to have faith that God loves us, that we are being moved forward in our lives, not being knocked back. And if we have that faith, we can move forward even with our human side, when is this going to end attitude that I have about the car. You know, you have that human side, you have the spiritual side. The spiritual side moves us beyond when the physical mind fails. The how comes, the why fors. And the other question that I'm asked a lot of the time is, what is the other side of life like? You're a medium. You see the spirit side of life a lot. Well, that's true and it's not true. I see spiritual beings. I don't really see them. I sense them. I have a knowing of them. I know what to say. I'm what they call a clairsentient. I get flashes and blinks of what they used to look like when they were here. But I don't actually see the spirit side of life. I see the spiritual beings, how they want to represent themselves to me. So my response to what does the other side of life looks like is that in trying to explain what the spirit side of life looks like to a living human being is like trying to describe colors to a blind person that's been blind from birth. You can give so many words, so many explanations, but without the sensory ability to see that color with physical eyes. And I'm not detracting from blind people at all. This isn't a statement about them. This is just an analogy. They cannot truly experience what you're experiencing. So too can we not experience what the spirit side of life is truly like, because we don't have conscious spiritual senses attached to this physical existence. We have a soul, we have spiritual perceptions, but to actually see the spirit side of life as it is, you would have to be in spirit with no physical body attached to you. You would have to be seeing it with your spiritual eyes. You would have to be feeling it with your spiritual heart, without any attachment or any coloring from the flesh. So the best you can do is describe the senses about that side of life. And that side of life, as I perceive it and as I have sensed it from thousands of people that have come back from the spirit side of life to me, is that it is a loving place. It is a caring place. There is no judgment and there is no hell. Not one person has come back, and I have had abusive people come back. I brought through this one woman's husband who was an abuser when he was here. And she was very distraught by the end of the reading, as you can imagine. She was wanting her mother to come through, who was a medium, and it was the anniversary of her mother's passing. And I find all this out after the reading, because I don't want any foreknowledge of a reading, because it colors my perception when I do it. this abusive person had come back and was trying to make amends. They were trying to show love that they couldn't show when they were here. They were trying to make things right. They were not condemned to hell forever, to be punished forever for their actions here. So there is a spiritual redemption beyond bad acts here. I know that. Evil, as people call it, is a choice of humankind. It is a personal choice of an individual to act a certain way, whether it's on a one-to-one basis or a national basis as a world leader. It is a personal choice that they are led to make by their own mind or by their lack of subconscious awareness of the mind of God. These are some questions that I get asked when I do these end-of-life counseling. And it definitely makes me look at my own belief system. It makes me look at where I'm at humanly as well as spiritually. I remember when I was in the United Kingdom studying mediumship at the Arthur Findlay College, and the best answer I ever heard about what the spirit side of life is like is this teacher stood up at 150 people, and he was asking what everybody thought the spirit side of life was like. And everybody gave their feelings and their opinions, everything from karmic to other things. And he said, now I'm going to tell you what the right answer is. And he said, the right answer is what every one of you have said. Because every one of us is guided by our perception of that side of life. Every one of us will change that perception as we spiritually progress. So it's not up to anyone to make that decision for you. And as a spiritualist, I say that there is a God, but I don't give people their idea of God. You have to have a personal experience with God to truly be moved by God's guidance. And it's up to each one of us to make that union, to make that connection. People like me that stand up here and speak about these things offer suggestions. We offer maybe an insight that you haven't had, but we don't tell you what to do. We don't tell you the decision to make. We hope we offer a little bit of guidance here and there to resolve some unanswered questions or some things that you're having difficulty getting by. Because believe you me, I have as many difficulties as anyone else does in their life. And I'm not going to tell them what decision to make, because I don't need to be taking on any more decisions to sort out than now. I have plenty of my own to sort out. I don't need to be taking on somebody else's decisions. That was a conversation me and my wife had last night on the way out to dinner. One of my kids is having a very difficult time. And she said, why don't you just tell him what to do? And I said, I'm not doing that. Well, that would be the right thing for him to do, is what this thing here that you think he should do. I said, I'm not telling him what to do. My advice to him has been, make a decision that you can live with. Not just today, but 5 years from now. Make a decision you can live with. You yourself. Not what I want you to do, not what your significant other wants you to do, not what your mom wants you to do, not what your sister. You make a decision that you can live with. Because in the silence of your own home, you are the one that's going to have to be dealing with that decision. Not me and not anybody else. So I said, I will help him once he makes a decision. I will assist him in his own life. As with all that goes on, life and spiritual attainment is a moving target. It changes day to day. It never stays the same. And that brings to mind something somebody told me one time when I was trying to get sober. And I've been sober since I was 35. He said, you know what the worst thing that could have happened to you while you were drinking is, because I was complaining about feeling guilty and feeling this and feeling that and having to deal with this and having to deal with that. He said, the worst thing that could have happened to you is nothing. Because then you would have stayed just like you were, and you would have drank until you died. So when we when I get into a little bit of a fit about everything that's going on in my life, I have to remember that peace is not nothing going on in your life. Peace is a comfort with what's going on in your life. Peace is the spiritual ability to connect and find God within whatever's happening to you. And this is what I hope to endeavor to do in the coming year, in the coming day. Because I need to take it one day. That's the only day I can deal with. So I would encourage you to look at your own spiritual lives. And again, my final saying is, don't hold it against yourself when you act human. When you're in that, my God, when is this going to end? Because we all get there. But that spiritual discipline allows you to move beyond that moment of frustration. It allows you to find sense with things that don't make sense to the physical mind. And in closing, as I did with my last lecture, I read something called On the 23rd Psalm, which always gives me guidance about why things are happening here, because sometimes we just do not know the reason for that. And sometimes we will never know the reason until we're on the other side of life. Because, again, we don't have the ability to see the totality of what is happening to us. Only a spiritual mind can see that, unhindered by the physical flesh. On the 23rd Psalm, in pastures green, not always so. Sometimes he who knoweth best, in kindness, leadeth me in weary ways where shadows be. And by still waters, not always so. Oft time the heavy tempest round me blow, and o'er the soul my waves and billows go. But when the storm beats loudest, and I cry aloud for help, the Master standeth by, and whispers to my soul, Lo, it is I am here. So where he leads me, I can safely go, and in the blessed hereafter I shall know why in his wisdom he hath led me so. Thank you. Happy New Year.